Alright, Gamer Bears, it is time for another episode of Unused Content in Video Games, and today we're looking at Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Look, right off rip, I know you guys are probably going to hate me for saying this, but I'm not the biggest fan of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but hey, if you happen to like this game, that's great. It's nice that you can enjoy something that I don't like, but let us start today with some unused content by starting off with the prototype information and some previous builds of the game. Let us begin. Alright, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are reimagined versions of the original Gen 1 titles. Most obviously Pokemon Yellow, which adds Alolan forms and all that. We already know all that gist. Let's get on to the prototype information, and also while we're at it, this is part 1 because there's quite a lot of information we're going to be talking about here. So, expect a part 2 in the near future. And if you happen to be enjoying this, at any point in this video end up enjoying this, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on more gaming content, such as more unused videos like this on unused content. So anyways, let us start with the February 26th, 2018 build of the game, leaked in July 21st, or July 2021. Lacks many final assets, so let's look at it. This is going to be one of the the longer parts of the video, yeah. And here's a subpage of some early maps. Alright, test map. The potion in the flowers can already be picked up, and isn't duplicated like in the later build. Alright, the test map copy of early Pallet Town has the same layout as the one in the May build, but the character script appears to be unfinished, while the NPCs by the player's house will still crash the game when spoken to, because they weren't given any dialogue yet, and the game doesn't know what to do about that, hence the crashing. The NPC by the lab cannot be interacted with, and speaking to the rival and woman in the center of town will both activate a brief textless cutscene wherein the player character will walk towards the woman. Then control is returned to the player. Talking to out-of-bounds shop NPC will trigger a glitched cutscene that varies depending on the initial map as well as the story progression. Walking anywhere near the town itself appears to cause lag. Collision of the ledge and most of the Route 1 is spotty and overall incomplete. So here's the February 2018 build. You can see that some of the character textures are a little unfinished and unpolished, as well as some of the buildings being in their early stages. And here's what the May 2018 build looks like. Slightly more polished, everything else, but mostly the same. And notice how the colors are a bit lighter here than they are in the final game. And there's this mysterious black line around the pond over here. Alright, here's more pictures of early Pallet Town. Outside, the player's house lacks an NPC next to it in both prototype builds. The background assets surrounding Pallet Town are placed differently when compared to the final, such as the trees around the edges being replaced. Oak's lab lacks some flower decorations outside. Its door also appears to be displaced and rotated incorrectly, as the doorknob can be seen clicking through the eastern wall. Alright, here's the 2018 February build, where the house here is green. And then later builds, they are blue now, this house. Personally, I like the green color more. That's just me. And here's what it looks like in the final game. Alright, here's another part in the February 2018 build. Alright, here's another one part of Pallet Town, also in the February 2018 build. And here's the final version of that, and the other final version. Alright, a different design for the sign in Pallet Town is presented in the prototype. It cannot be interacted with. The player's house also lacks flower decorations around the front side. Alright, here's what that looks like. And here's what it looks like in the final version. Alright, player's house upstairs. The player's house is furnished completely differently than in the final version. The back wall, desk section, and TV stand have been entirely redone. These were all changed in following builds. Here's what it looks like. Also, that's kind of a bad spot for a TV. Have you ever tried watching things on your TV while it's directly on the floor? It's not the best thing. Kind of glad they put that table there. But anyways. And those are the 3 different builds there. Alright, a TV table and a cushion in front of the TV were added, and then the May build. The windows in the February build lack curtains. Alright, as you can see there. And the north-facing window is above the stairs rather than in the center of the wall. Which doesn't look as good, I guess. While the center of the wall replacing the map. The wainscoting, whatever that is, on the wall also continues straight rather than moving down diagonally with the stairs. The desk lamp has not been added yet. The computer tower is more basic. And there's a yellow desk chair, rather than a wooden chair with a green cushion, as you can see right over here. Alright. Interestingly, the map on the wall represents Kanto's appearance in Red and Blue's official artwork, which differs massively when compared to the one in LGPE. Alright, and that's the map right over here, and then the map is changed wherever the map happens to be. But anyways, here's the map build for that, as you can see on the wall in the prototype build, or the 2018 build, from February of 2018. And here is this other artwork of Kanto's map, which looks kind of different to how Kanto looks nowadays, honestly. And then here's what we got in the final version. And which happens to be the same, the same map that's inside your case of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which I like. This is one of the better Pokemon Inside artworks. Alright, the player's house downstairs. Alright, here's what it looks like in the February build. And here's what it looks like in the final. Alright, the trash can is a different angle. Mom's TV is turned off. The cutlery in the back cabinet lacks any different textures, and potted plant is missing, and the kitchen sink lacks some general assets. The shadows on the wall are too far down from their source, causing a stripe around the top of the room. Alright, here's the rival's house, or the Pokemon Stadium NPC, Trace, or if you watched my Pokemon Let's Go Eevee Nuzlocke, F you! That's just the rival's name, please don't get offended. But yeah. Alright, here's what his house looked like in the February build. A little picture of him over here. Alright, here's the May build. And then we can compare it to the final build, where the rug here is blue rather than a green color. Again, green's the better color. They should have just stuck with green, in my opinion. Your rival's house uses a completely different color scheme on both the inside and out. This was changed as early as the May 2018 build, but only on the outside. This could possibly be a reference to the original rival's house in Gen 1, who was usually known as Green. A different map is shown on the wall, more similar to the one in the player's house. Alright, Kanto map on the table beneath the books in the May 2018 build has not been added yet. It would be removed in the final build. Alright, and the camera angle in the house is also a little different, as you can see there. Now, this camera angle definitely does look a little better just straight on, instead of slightly top view. Alright, Oak's lab inside. Here's what it looked like in the 2018 February build. And here's what it looks like in the final version. And note how Professor Oak is in here in the February build. Likely his 3D model might have not been made yet. That's my guess. Alright, the NPC placement is different, as are the top of the bookshelves, in the middle with the boxes, being gone in the final. The contents of those bookshelves are also significantly unfinished in the build. The researcher NPC who is usually sitting in the chair standing in this build, and with many areas in this build of the game, the lighting is also rather unfinished. The room also has a different floor texture, with the floorboards of the opposite direction as the final. The windows' lights are missing as well. Alright, here's another build of Professor Oak's lab in the 2018 February build. Some of the shading does look a little bit different than in the final game. And for some reason, there's no picture for the final version, for whatever reason. Alright, further to the back of the lab, the assets are very unfinished. The wall and desks are completely different, and you can't walk up to the blue tank in this early build via a ramp. Look guys, a ramp! You could use it as a ramp! Sorry, just had to reference that. Despite Pikachu being caught and appearing in cutscenes, the model will become Eevee once it starts following you, which is weird. Probably as a way to test Eevee's running animations too, I guess. After receiving your Pokedex, the rival will immediately vanish upon ending Oak's monologue. Alright, Round 1. Round 1 is a very unfinished battle background when compared to the final. Here's what it looks like. Pikachu also, his colors look a bit muted out here. Alright, and then this is what the final version looks like. Alright, additionally, Round 1 also uses a much larger model for its tall grass tiles, which actually I kind of prefer this over this. I don't know. Note the 3 wide entrance as opposed to the 4 wide in the final. And here's what it looks like. I guess they look more like bushes than grass by that logic. Alright, Viridian City. On the road to Viridian City. Let me stop, that's cringy, I know. Attempting to enter any building will automatically crash the game, because there was no insides made for those buildings yet, most likely. Walking to much of the eastern part of the city will cause the game to crash. The difference in Viridian's lacking background assets are very noticeable in this build, such as the trees and outer rocks. As you can see right over here, the trees are obscuring most of this area. Kind of just in the way, which is a little rude, Mr. Trees. But anyways, and now there's a little more space in between trees in this build. Or in the final build. Our Viridian lacks many NPCs that would normally be present in the final version. The bushes here also lack any sort of collision with this build, and you know if objects don't have collision, the player can walk right through them. Alright, and here's what that looks like. And here's what it looks like in the final version. And also the Master Trainer happens to be here in the final version, and in the 2018 February build, they're not there. And here's another picture of the Feb 2018 build. Alright, and here's what it looks like compared to the... Wait a minute, did I click the wrong picture? Yes, no I didn't. No, I clicked the right picture. Anyways, interestingly, the lamppost used is slightly different in the prototype, and a different sign can also be seen when compared to the final. Now here's what that looks like. And here's the final version. A much simpler sign, it looks like. Without this, whatever this top part is here. The wall found on the western side of the city is far darker in the final version. Alright, and here's what that looks like in the 2018 February build. And here's what it looks like in the final build. Alright, instead of a fence next to the Pokemon, there is a tree present instead. This is notable from being a different first spotted in the game's reveal trailer, but not in the 2018 build nor the final game. And here's what that looks like. Alright, and then the fence, as you can see, well, there is a fence right over here, as you can see in the final version. Alright, Viridian Forest. When in Viridian Forest, certain Pokemon will appear with a strange glow around them. That isn't present in the final version, and we don't have a picture of that, it looks like, unless what happens if I click this. Nothing. It's just telling me login required, and I'm not wasting my time with that. Our Viridian Forest sports several different camera angles, trainer placements, and background assets. When compared to the final, in some areas, the wild grass placement is also different in this version. Alright, Route 2. Route 2 features significantly different backgrounds and foreground assets when compared to the final version. It also has a completely different camera angle in this build. Alright, here's the Feb 2018 build of Route 2. And here's another one with these weird, very unfinished flower models. Or at least they look like flower models. Another picture from the February build. Strangely, Route 2 sports pink placeholder icons. Typically, okay, this keeps happening. I gotta fix that eventually, but anyways, sorry for that. Placeholder icons. Typically in the place of where the flowers would be in the final. Here's what that looks like, as you can see them up here. They almost look like really pixelated butterflies. Alright, the house where the player receives the light up has a different camera angle. The background elements, such as the kitchen top and cabinet top, are also different in the final. Here's what that looks like. There's more of a top-down view in this camera angle, which the final game it's more straightforward. Thus is also missing assets on the outside, while compared to the final version. Here's what this looks like. Still looks a lot more finished than Sword and Shield's outside world during its early build, which again was developed while this game was being developed at the same time too, funnily enough. Alright, Diglett's Cave has a grass on top of the entrance in this build, which here's what that looks like. Well, in the final version, it's just normal old cave. So I don't know, that gives it a little more character, I guess, but it's more cave than less of a meadow type of cave, if you know what I mean. Just before Peter City, a significantly different camera angle can be seen when compared to the final. This one's more straightforward view, less top-down view. Alright, the right gate leading up to Diglett's Cave has a different camera angle and is devoid of any NPCs, and here's what this looks like. Man, is it empty in there. Very boring. Alright, the exit. The graphic here is also a little different. Here's what that looks like if you happen to be able to read Japanese. Alright, the exit gate between Viridian Forest and Pewter lacks NPCs and features a different camera angle, as you can see here. Accessing Viridian Forest from the entrance gate on Route 2 will result in a crash because the transition loading screen for that hasn't been implemented yet. Surprisingly, the carpet texture in this gate is a difference of the final version. Here's what it looks like. Route 21. Route 21 lacks grass and includes an additional trainer just below Pallet Town that doesn't appear in the final. By the time of the May 2018 prototype, this was changed, and here's what it looks like. And here's what it looks like in the final. No trainer there, which I'm pretty sure in the original Gen 1 games there was a trainer there. So interesting that they decided to take that out. Maybe in case any players tried to shiny on here and they didn't get to fight that trainer yet, they wouldn't have gotten in the way. That might be why they removed it. There's a visible seam between Viridian City and Route 22's ground texture, as I believe it's talking about this, maybe? And the Route 22 lacks different details, I can't read again, in this background assets. Many of the trees are likewise unfinished and use very low poly models. Here's what it looks like. Still a lot less low poly than Sword and Shield's prototype, just saying. And here's that low poly model we just talked about, right over here. Alright, here's the final versions. And that tree has not been low polygonized, if that's a phrase. Here's another build. With some Nidorans in the background. Here's the finished build. Here's another one from 2018 Feb. And another final version picture. And notice how some bushes and other assets are missing too. Like, yeah, mostly just the bushes and the fences look a little different. Alright, here's another picture, again with more low poly bushes. And then here it is, more finished. And yes, there is a little bit of a different angle here. Alright, and here's what the front of Victory Road or the Pokemon League building would look like. And again with more low poly bushes and trees. And here it is in the final. And notice how there's two evergreen-like trees over here in the 2018 February build, while here, they're just bushes. Alright, the Route 22 gate has an NPC that can't be interacted with. Completely different early models, and are different camera angles. You can tell how unfinished this is, since the earlier parts of the games definitely have a bit more detail in it, but later parts in the game like this do not. And those prototype Rhydon statues. And in the final version, they become Pokeballs later. I prefer the Rhydon statues, but whatever. Route 23 has a different angle, a camera angle, unfinished foreground and background assets, as well as a strange NPC placement. Here's what that looks like. We're kind of just staring at the wall over here. Here's what that looks like in the final version. Alright, yeah, this NPC is standing in a bit of a funny place. And here's what that looks like in the final version, but the final version has these little forget-me-nots, I believe these flowers are called. Correct me if I'm wrong. Alright, here's another one of the February 2018 build, though I think this guy's standing in a bit of a better place compared to the last NPC. And here's where he is in the final version. Here's another pic from Feb 2018. And another one from the final version. Alright, and for some reason this guy's standing on water instead of swimming like in the final version. Which I'll get to that in a split second, but here's another picture of the other guards. Here's where he's placed in the final version. And again, this guy must think he's Jesus because he's standing on water. Technically, he's not standing on the water. He looks more like he's floating just a bit. Just above the water. Almost clinging onto the little ground edge over here. And here's what it looks like in the final version with him actually swimming, which I wouldn't be surprised if they just placed his water below the water and made it look like he was floating. Alright, now this time, he's still standing above the water, but he's a little closer to the ground, I guess, now. I don't know why they didn't just place him right over here, but whatever. And here's what that looks like in the final version. Oh yes, where I tried to shiny hunt Poliwags and I still can't get with them. Also, notice how in the final version, there's grass over here, but in the 2018 February build, there is no grass or flowers. Because you can actually, in the final version, you can actually get Poliwags to spawn up here, but here it looks like they weren't going to spawn originally. And Psyducks don't appear in this route, at least not to my knowledge. From all the times I tried shiny hunting Poliwag here, there was not a single Psyduck that showed up. And in the final version, only Poliwags would show up in this area, so that's interesting to think about, but whatever. Same with Psyduck, or Golduck, I meant to say. Here's Golduck in this version. And then there's Magikarp and Poliwag as usual. The two Pokemon that actually do show up here in the final version of the game. Here's another small area of it, of Route 23. And here's the final version of it with a Fear overhead, as well as the Nidoqueen Master Trainer. Further on in the route, the statue and grass placements are also differ when compared to the final version. As you can see between these two pictures, here's what it looks like. And this time, Pokemon actually do show up in this area in the final game. Alright, here's more of Route 23. Alright. And now the entrance to Victory Road right over here. And notice how some of the flowers are missing in this build. Well, in the final version, they're there. Alright, Victory Road has an unfinished battle background when compared to the final version, where it shows the outside rather than, the caves. Also, Onyx looks a little cursed here for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on why. Alright, here's what it looks like in the final version. Alright, the torches throughout the whole map have different models from the final version, as you can see over here. Generally, the map is darker and lacks many of final foreground and background assets. Here's what it looks like. And there's a Glaraveler in the back. Here's the final version. And notice how the little gate thing or whatever that is still there? Well, in this build, it looks like one of those old strength rocks. Alright, here's another picture of this build with Onyx's weird-looking textures. Alright, here's this other build from the final version. Alright, the strong push puzzle is mostly missing in this version. Most likely wasn't implemented in yet. Probably the concept wasn't even thought of yet either. That's a possibility too. Here's what it looks like in the final version, compared to the 2018 February build. Alright, the remaining strong push pillars use the model for the gym statue, most likely for testing purposes. Since you'd still be able to push them, they'd probably have to put like little push animations on there, to test out like Eevee/Pikachu's pushing animation, something like that. Here's what that looks like in the final version. The gate that is here in the original disappears into the floor when activated, and its collision returns whenever a battle is entered. Here's what that looks like, and whatever this weird red effect is, I don't know what that's about. Alright, here's what that looks like in the final version. Honestly, I almost prefer the darker shading of the prototype build of Victory Road over here. Oh no, is that the trainer that made me lose my Gyarados and my Nuzlocke? I hope it's not. It might be that trainer. Somebody let me know if I'm wrong. Because if so, everybody give her a middle finger. She deserves it for killing my Gyarados. But anyways. Features different trainer placements to the final. Here we go. Ooh, curse you. And your Hitmonchan. Anyways. And here's what that looks like in the final version. More than a year later, and I'm still not over that. I'm still salty about it, in case you can't tell. But anyways, let's just finally move on. Here's another picture of the 2018 February build. Notice the little green line over here. Most likely it was there for, like, testing maybe walk cycles or whatever, or how far an NPC could walk. I don't know. Alright, here's what that looks like in comparison to the final. Alright, floor 2. Many trainers feature different placements or are outright missing in this build when compared to the final. Here's what that looks like. Again, with Onyx in the background and this Pokeball over here, or item, whatever the item is. Here's what it looks like in the final version. Here's another picture. And here's the final. Alright, the coach trainer is in a different location, as you can see here. Alright, a rock to split the player's dungeon progression is not yet here in this build. Alright, Indigo Plateau. As with many routes, the background and foreground assets appear to be different than in the final version. Here we are. Not that much different, obviously. I think some, like, shading is different or whatever. But notice how on the foreground elements over here, there's flowers in this build, but in the previous build, there are rocks here. Our February 2018 build, once again. And here's what it looks like in the final. The shadows do look like they have slightly different placements compared to the final version as well. Just slightly different placements. The game lacks a skybox, which is noticeable due to having a different camera angle. Alright, you have a skybox here, which is kind of obscured by the trees in the final version of the game. Whereas in the prototype February 2018 build, it's just a black void because there's no, well, skybox, as you mentioned, or at least no trees obscuring it. Alright, now here's a really, really unfinished thing, looking like Sword and Shield's early builds over here. The entire main room lacks any textures. Interestingly, it does feature the NPCs that you can purchase the Megastones from, with full functionality, in fact. Goes to show where their priorities were. Well, then again, Mega Evolution is awesome, so I don't blame them. Here's what that looks like. And here's what it looks like in the final version. Much better. Alright, here's what that looks like. Again. And here's what it looks like in the final. And now we're on to the Elite Four rooms. All of the Elite Four members lack final models, and simply appear as black belts, with the exception of Bruno, because he's kind of similar to black belts already. Alright, the camera angles in each of their rooms are also different when compared to the final versions. Which I kind of like that they changed that. Here it's, again, more of the normal top-down view, or semi-top-down view. But in the final build, it's more straightforward, so you can actually see the Elite Four member and if they have any Pokemon next to them, which I kind of prefer this. Kind of gives the Elite Four a more imposing view. Alright, Bruno's room lacks the post-processing heat wave effect that appears in the final version. Here it is. And you can't really see Bruno's face here, so I'm glad they changed that camera angle here. And I think those heat waves are there to evoke a feeling of intensity since you're about to fight one of the strongest trainers in the region. Which I do like that they changed that. Alright, here's what Agatha's room would have looked like. Again, black belt in a misty room that has ghost vibes in it, that's funny. But again, it was there just for testing purposes. And before their 3D models were made. Alright, Lance's room lacks the overlaid effects, and that can be seen in the final. Too bad we can't see that picture. Alright, in the Champion's room. Not only does this room lack any trainers or lighting effects, it also has a significantly different camera angle than in the final version. Despite the lack of characters, Professor Oak's model can be spotted to the left of the bounds. Alright, I can't really see his model here, so I don't know what they're on about with that one, so you probably need to have like a hacked camera in order to see that. I wouldn't be surprised. Anyways, here's what this looks like in the final version, with different lighting and these lights over here being on, where in the previous build they're not. Alright, the Hall of Fame room is basic and completely untextured. It has no cutscene implemented. Alright, here's what that looks like. And the final version. In comparison. Alright, and finally, Oak stands to the left of the player rather than to the right. The model of the Hall of Fame machine is rudimentary, with a smaller section on its front. The floor has a Pokeball symbol with radiating triangles around it as well. Alright, didn't we already look at that? Yeah, we did. Alright, now we're done with that section. Why don't we look at some other parts of the prototype builds? Alright, title screen. The title screen and logo are completely different. This version doesn't check for your Eevee's custom outfit, and instead uses a generic looping image. The individual frames of this image can be found in the files of this build. It shares its title screen with the May 2018 build, but in this build cannot be used to access a hidden debug menu by pressing select. And here's what the prototype build looked like with the Japanese text. I kind of like the shading on here. I don't know. It does look slightly unfinished, but it's got its style. It could even, if they perfected this could even be a separate art style. It wouldn't be that bad, actually. Anyways, here's what it looks like in the final version. Eevee being adorable as ever, the little pet. Alright, here's an animated video of the title screen. Alright, it's telling me it's unavailable, so I do apologize for that. Likewise, there are two very early logos that can be found in the files, alongside the final Japanese logo, as well as the final logos in all the other languages. Here's what it looks like. Here's a closer look at the final version. Alright, tutorial. Catching your starter appears to be very different in this version. Oak actually appears from behind the house in this build, whereas in the final, he was already standing in the grass at Route 1. Alright, due to the different camera angle, it also appears that Pallet Town lacks any skybox textures. As you can see here, it's a little black up there, having a completely black void instead. Alright, here's what those early builds look like. It's kind of hard to see the lack of a skybox here because of the trees obscuring it, but you can just slightly see it from here. Alright, here's one last picture of it. Oak's face looks slightly different, I think. Alright, when approaching, Pikachu doesn't react to the player as curiously as they do in the final version. Kind of just give him a dead-eyed stare. And then here's what it looks like in the final version. That face is adorable. Instead of being caught in a Pokeball and having to chase your partner Pokemon to Oak's lab, it plays out far more traditionally by comparison. The game also lacks the mandatory rival battle at the start of the game. That most likely wasn't implemented yet. Alright, cut/different visuals and mechanics. Alright, capturing. While Pokemon lack their typical cries, most likely weren't implemented into the game yet. When catching a Pokemon, the Pokeball is shown at a different angle. Alright, here's what the angle looks like. The more straightforward angle is much better than the slightly to the left angle that it has. Alright, failing or catching a Pokemon will now reduce your stock of 999 stacks of regular balls. That's most likely just put into the game, so they can test catching every single catchable Pokemon in the game. Pokeballs cannot be aimed, and you need to use debug mode to catch anything at all. Good, I hate the aiming mechanic from Pokemon Go, it sucks. Part of the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of this game. Debug, capture, and auto-hit during a battle. They also lack any sound effects. All of these differences have been changed in all following builds. And here's what that looks like, a slightly closer look. And here's the final version. Notice how the floor textures are a little different as well. Our Dex registration. The visuals of registering a wild Pokemon in the Dex are off-center and don't scale properly depending on the Pokemon, as they do in all subsequent builds. Each Pokemon lacks their cry when being registered, not implemented into the game just yet. The graphics of both the Pokemon types, as well as their personal records, height and weight, do not function as intended, unlike in the final version. All of these changes have been fixed in following builds. Here's what it looks like, as Tauros is our little test subject. I don't know why they're straightforward and all zoomed in like that. It's a little weird. Kind of glad they changed that. Imagine you catching every single Pokemon and then just zoomed in like this. You can't even see most of their 3D model. Alright, here's the final version of that. Alright, encounter HUD. The general UI design of the wild encounters are slightly different, using tweaked fonts and symbols to show the wild Pokemon stats when compared to the final. Here's what it looks like. Notice how the level of font is significantly different. It's more pixelated, which I prefer the final version of that. Though the font for the CP, or what was it, Combat Power I believe it's called in Pokemon Go terms, is a little different compared to the font in the final version. As well as the male and female symbol being different too. In the final version, it's just white for male or female symbol. However, in the prototype build from February 2018, it's in a circle and blue or red depending on which symbol is being used. Alright, Pokemon summary screens, which also has this weird zoom-in effect once again. And the shading is a little unfinished as well. Alright, Pokemon summary screen. A Pokemon summary screen lacks the many final assets, such as the background, as well as having many different appearances when it comes to the front and icon placements. The Pokemon itself is also largely displays the irrelevance of its species. Backgrounds were implemented during the May 2018 build, but they're still largely unfinished. The fire type graphic is used in places of every other type's graphic, which wasn't fixed until the final version. Alright, here's what that looks like. There's no background. The background is just slightly blurred out. Here's that from another angle. And I guess Tauros has a fire type move over here for some reason, or they're all just fire type moves. As I said, those are likely just there as placeholders. If this were in English, I'd be able to tell just a little bit easier. But as I stated before, those are likely just placeholders. That's why they were there before all the other different types were made. I notice how the background is different. It doesn't have the normal, typing effect that we see in the final version of that. And that's something we'll get into either later in this video or in part 2. Most likely in part 2. Alright, here's another image of this. I know this Tauros has timid nature. Not the best nature for it. May I recommend jolly nature, though? Yeah, excuse me. But you can see some parts are actually in English rather than Japanese here. Some of them. And here's what that looks like in the final version. The background I was talking about before with the normal type symbols and whatnot. And here's the final version of that. Alright, saving. A saving screen is very different to that of the final. Instead of using 3D poses for each gym leader and their badge, it instead uses early assets, most of which is concept art. Most likely it's placeholders. Most stats don't function using placeholder data. This menu is very similar to the one seen in Build 30 of Pokemon Sword, as we mentioned in the Pokemon Sword Unused videos. Also featuring the same placeholder adventure started, current date, and last saved values. The trainer rank is absent, although the space for it is still there, as we've discussed during the Pokemon Sword and Shield Unused video, both in this and the May build. And here's what they look like again. And notice how Elaine's pose is a little different. She's just staring at something. What is she staring at? I want to know. And notice how the gym leaders all have concept arts. They all still look decent in my opinion, I think. And here's what it looks like in the final version. I've always used Elaine whenever I've played this game, so it's kind of the first time I'm seeing Chase in this pose. And here are all the concept arts, and then the ones we see in the final game. They both look pretty decent. They could have used either one, honestly, though I guess the 3 models are a bit better, but still. Maybe some people can find the gym leaders straight up staring at you to be a little uncanny. Anyways, town map icon. Early town map icons can be found in this game's files that aren't in the final. Interestingly, one of them is for a fishing encounter, which did not exist in any prototype nor the final version. Wasn't this the first Pokemon game to kind of take out fishing, actually? I just realized that. Well, actually, that's not true. Sword and Shield later on had fishing, and technically BDSP as well, but every other Pokemon game. This, Scarlet and Violet, and Legends Arceus didn't have fishing, so that's interesting. So this was technically the first main series Pokemon game to not have fishing in it, despite the originals having fishing. How funny. Anyways, this suggests that the fishing mechanic may have been planned at some point, and here's what the prototype icons look like. Perhaps Pikachu or Eevee could have had some sort of special move that allowed them to fish with you or something. That's my small guess, since you rely on them to use certain HMs. Like strength, or excuse me, power push I think was called, or whatever. I don't know, strong push I think was called actually. Alright, strangely, pressing B and R at the same time during a battle will end it instantly. This could have been intended as a debug feature, most likely just to test running away from battles, and getting into battles, and to test out certain moves and whatnot. Or, you know, if the developers just, things went south for them and they had to rage quit, I don't know, that too. Alright, bugs and glitches. Other times NPCs will walk in places where they're not supposed to, like, oh my god, this little girl is Jesus confirmed. Alright, oddly enough, the player will, at times, automatically and randomly mount and dismount many of their accessible Pokemon. Again, most likely as a way to test out different walking and running animations for certain Pokemon. Alongside housing some unfinished animations. They even appear in the areas that they shouldn't be able to, such as inside buildings. This was obviously a very work-in-progress feature at the time. It was fixed by the time of the May 2018 build. Here's what it looks like right in Tauros. And there appears to be... Not exactly no... I think there's no water box over here, not exactly a sky box. Since I believe in the final version there's supposed to be a body of water here. This is why it appears to be white. Alright, and here's a Tauros in a building. Yeah, that Tauros is going to break the TV and the Nintendo Switch. Bad Tauros, bad. Alright, finally, bizarrely, rushing past a tree on a Tauros will cause it to shake out alongside an accompanying sound effect. This doesn't ever appear to line up with the mechanic present in the final, as it was removed at some point before the May 2018 build. I have a feeling this is more than just the Tauros being able to run through it. Perhaps certain Pokemon were able to shake the trees, actually, and certain Pokemon you could actually battle in them. That's my guess. It's kind of similar to the rustling tree mechanic in the Gen 7 games, and Sun and Moon and Ultra Moon, as well as the headbutt mechanic from the Johto games. That's my guess on what that was initially going to be. Alright, in areas where water is present, its audio is noticeably louder than the final version. Alright, the majority of Pokemon have outright broken movement patterns when in a wild encounter. No Pokemon cries work despite being in the sound files for the game, they just weren't implemented yet, that's why. Anyways, we're done with this segment, so right over here. Alright, we just looked at this, right? No, we did not. There's a much larger part over here, but I want to cover that in part 2. Alright, yep, went over all these already. So, let me just make sure this is everything we'll be looking at right now. That was a prototype Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. There's some other small parts I'd like to talk about real quick too, because that was the pre-release information, as you can see over here. And now we can deal with the pre-release info in the next video. We could deal with that later on. So there's a few other things I'd like to talk about real quick while we're here. Unobtainable shiny Pokemon. In this game, Mew from prior games transferred from Pokemon Home are blocked from entering this game. Likely to sell the Pokeball Plus. Gee, great move, Game Freak, great move. I never bought one of those things, so heh. Sorry if that offended anybody who actually did buy it, that's not what I meant. But anyways, Shiny Mew still exists in the game, but cannot be obtained as the Pokeball Plus Mew is shiny locked. And here's Shiny Mew in game. The partner Pikachu and partner Eevee technically qualify as alternate forms and are shiny locked. They use different models and textures in-game than regular Pikachu and Eevee. Though if hacked in, their shiny textures are identical to their non-shiny textures. And this is apparently a shiny partner Pikachu and a shiny partner Eevee, interestingly enough. Alright, unused items. The game contains a lot, and I mean a lot, of unused items, the majority being leftovers from previous entries, such as TMs and HMs, which are all from Generation 6. Most of them use the question mark graphic as a placeholder. The only one that retains their intended icons are the first set of unused balls, from Safari Balls to Cherish Balls in the list, when in the final game you only have Pokeballs, Master Balls, Ultra Balls, and Great Balls. So, other Pokeballs being present in this game were originally going to be a thing? That would have been cool. But whatever. All but one of the unused balls will display as a regular ball if a Pokemon is sent out from it. The exception is the Safari Ball, which will instead cause the game to become unresponsive and eventually crash, because that is encoded into the game since, Safari Zone isn't in this game, it was replaced with the Go Park. Alright, what happens if I expand this? Alright, here's all the Pokeballs and other unused items that are here. As usual, if you need to pause to read this, go on ahead. Funnily enough, Sacred Ash was going to be in the game, but Ho-Oh is not a Generation 1 Pokemon. So, I wonder how that would have been used had it been in the final game. Maybe this suggests that we were originally going to get Gen 2 Pokemon in this game? I don't know. Also, Lava Cookie, one of the greatest items ever because, well, it's a cookie. Who doesn't like cookies, eh? Alright, notice how all their fossils are here as well, showing that maybe fossil Pokemon from the other generations are going to be in this game too. And Gristmius or Giratina is maybe going to show up in this game. This shows that I'm starting... You know what? This is making me think of a little theory. Because you also have Genesect's different drives over here as well. That makes me think that maybe initially this wasn't going to be a Generation 1 remake. Maybe this was going to be another Pokemon Go style main series game with more than just Generation 1 Pokemon plus Melton and Melmetal in it. That's an interesting theory. I would have liked the game more if that were the case. Still would have liked it most because of, the stupid Pokemon Go mechanics, but whatever. There's all the different berries. So a lot of these most likely got scrapped because these are not the stat berries, the super effectiveness berries, like the Yachi berry, for example. If hit by an Ice Type move, the Ice Type move is weakened. Because held items aren't a thing in this game, they decided to scrap those, which makes me think the held items are also originally going to be in the main build. But let's scroll past this a little faster. Alright, Soldu. Sounds like Latios and Latios were going to be in the game. XP share being scrapped because of how it works now, starting with this game, weirdly enough. Alright, and Choice Band, one of the greatest competitive items. Life Orb, another one of the greatest competitive items, and all that. The EV things, which EV training you don't do in this game. EV training was replaced with the candy system. Alright, the place showing the Arceus, which is going to be in this game. And all that. Just further proves that, I think we're going to get more than just Generation 1 Pokemon in this game. That's just my guess. I guess before it was like, nope, we're going to make this a Gen 1 remake, end of story, right? Alright, once again, the Red Chain. The Old Rod. And a lot of other things. This is a very long list, so I'm just going to keep on going with this. Also, Eviolite would have been in this game. So definitely, and again, the gems in this game were nerfed and are somehow, kind of intended to be in the game's files, but were never fully implemented, because again, held items weren't a thing. X-Transceiver for some reason from the Gen 5 games. Weakness Policy and Assault still one of the best competitive items. Alright, the other Megastones of the non-Generation 1 Pokemon are here, showing that they were going to show up in this game eventually as well. Well, that confirms it. I think we were going to originally get more than just Generation 1 Pokemon in this game. And here's the other Mega Evolution accessories. And Z-moves are here as well. Well, Mina's the only Generation 7 character that shows up in this game, so perhaps maybe she was originally going to use her Z-move against you and you were able to use Z-moves too? I don't know. Something different. She probably didn't even know about Alola yet at the time of this game in canonical order. Alright, and now we move on to unused abilities. All 151 Pokemon from Generation 1 have their abilities programmed in, despite them never coming into play. Moreover, despite abilities not existing in either of these games or Pokemon Go, Melton and Melmetal were given one, with Meltan having the ability of Magnet Pull and Melmetal having the Iron Fist ability, both abilities that they will have in Pokemon Sword and Shield, by the way. Both of those abilities would end up being used as their abilities in the following Unused games, Pokemon Sword and Shield. Unused moves. Despite only a limited selection of moves being available in-game, the rest of the existing moves in the series up to this point can also be found among the moves data in the game's files. Interestingly, hacking any of the unused moves into a Pokemon's moveset causes it to display as an egg, which can't battle and whose party sprites are modeled and are also otherwise unused. Most likely put in just in case you try to hack it into the game, it won't crash the game. Alright, unused Wonder Card text. Alright, unused text messages related to Wonder Cards, with only the ones at offsets 00004, Mythical, and 20, Birthday, being used by the current released gifts. Interestingly, offset 09 mentions a hidden ability gift, showing that abilities are initially going to show up in this game. But no, that doesn't happen. Even though abilities do not exist in these games, just like held items, despite being present in the data from every available Pokemon. Alright, and here's what that looks like. I'll give you guys a second to read these. Alright, if you need to pause, just pause. Alright, leftover Pokemon data. Despite only the original 151 plus Melton and Melmetal being present, the game's files contains the names typing data and species name of the rest of the Pokedex. For some reason, their models and textures are all stubbed out, with those of Marowak specifically. Alright, and finally, regional differences. Alright, here's what this looks like. I didn't want to do that, but here's a closer look at the title screen. And here's the English versions. Just with different text, pretty much. That's it. Alright, and finally, for now in part 1, while the title screen of the Japanese version uses a button prompt in English, which says, push a button, in capital letters, it is actually different from the one used in the international version, which says, press the A button. It's possible that this change was made to prevent people reading it as push any button, instead of push the A button. Alright, that makes sense. The font used is also more squarish than in the international versions. As you can see here, push A button. I mean, I kind of get what they're saying, but yeah, that could be easily misinterpreted as saying press the A button. I don't know, if this was in like the Xbox controller or something being used, I think that text would work a bit more, but no. Because Nintendo controllers have lettered buttons rather than shaped buttons. But anyways, that will be it for part 1 of this build of the game, for this unused contents video. In the next part, we'll go over everything that's in this part of the build. Anyways, if y'all enjoyed this and you want to see more, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and follow. Or, without following, I guess follow my Twitch channel too, I didn't mean to say that, but yeah. And as our question of the day, as usual, what is one thing that you've seen in this unused build, an unused contents video, that you wish was in the final version of the game? Please let us know in the comments below. Anyways, thank y'all for watching, have a perfect day.